It was a busy morning at the international airport. Passengers hurried through the shiny terminals, dragging suitcases and juggling passports. Some looked tired, some excited, and others simply impatient. Among them walked Clara Benson, a stylish woman in her mid-30s. Dressed in an expensive outfit and holding a designer handbag, Clara's presence carried an air of superiority. She had a reputation, a sharp tongue, a quick temper, and little patience for people she considered below her. When she checked her boarding pass, Clara smiled with satisfaction. Seat 2B business class? She enjoyed the comfort and luxury of premium travel, far from what she often called the chaos of the common crowd. Boarding was announced, and Clara confidently walked down the jet bridge, heels clicking against the floor. Entering the aircraft, she greeted the flight attendant with a forced smile and made her way to row 2. But as soon as she reached her seat, she froze. In seat 2A sat an elderly man. He was dressed plainly, in a neatly pressed but simple shirt. His skin was weathered, marked by years under the sun. His hands were rough, the kind only decades of hard work could shape. On his lap rested a small, worn-out bag and a folded newspaper. Unlike the other business-class passengers who carried laptops and expensive gadgets, this man looked almost out of place. Clara's expression hardened. "This must be a mistake," she muttered under her breath as she placed her suitcase in the overhead bin. She glanced at him again, irritation flashing in her eyes. How could someone like him possibly belong here, in business class? The old man, however, remained calm. He greeted her with a gentle nod and a polite smile, unaware of the storm brewing in Clara's mind. Clara quickly summoned a flight attendant. "There seems to be a problem," she said coldly. "Are you sure he belongs here? This is business class." Her voice was loud enough for nearby passengers to turn their heads. Some frowned at her arrogance, while others waited silently to see what would unfold. The flight attendant, maintaining her professional composure, checked the elderly man's ticket. She smiled politely and replied, "Yes, ma'am. This gentleman is in the correct seat, 2A. Clara's jaw tightened. She sank into her seat reluctantly, but her mind was restless. How could she possibly endure a long flight sitting next to him? Little did she know, this old man was about to teach her a lesson she would never forget. The plane roared down the runway and lifted into the sky. Clara leaned back in her seat, but her eyes kept wandering toward the elderly man beside her. Every detail about him irritated her, the way he calmly folded his newspaper, the way his shoes looked worn, even the simple pen clipped to his pocket. How could someone like him afford business class? She thought bitterly. To Clara, business class was a sanctuary for the elite, a space free from the ordinary. And yet, here sat this man, quietly occupying a seat she believed should belong to people of her status. An hour into the flight, the attendants began serving meals. The aroma of freshly cooked food filled the cabin. Clara ordered wine and a gourmet dish, as usual. The old man politely asked for water and a simple vegetarian plate. Clara couldn't resist. "You know," she said sharply, leaning closer, "business class isn't really meant for people like you." The elderly man turned his head slowly. His eyes, though aged, carried a calm wisdom. "And what kind of people would that be?" he asked softly. Clara smirked. "People who can actually afford it. People who belong here." Some nearby passengers shifted uncomfortably, overhearing the exchange. The flight attendant glanced toward them, sensing the tension. But the old man simply smiled faintly and replied, "Affordability isn't always measured by money, my dear. Sometimes it's measured by sacrifice." Clara frowned, confused. "What do you mean by that?" The old man placed his glass of water on the tray table and looked straight ahead. "One day, you might understand. When comfort comes at the cost of others' suffering, it isn't luxury, it's theft." Clara felt heat rising in her face. She wasn't used to being spoken to like this, especially not by someone she considered inferior. She opened her mouth to argue but stopped when she noticed the silence around her. Other passengers were watching quietly, some even nodding slightly at the old man's words. The rest of the meal passed in uneasy silence. Clara turned toward the window, pretending to ignore him, but inside her chest, something unsettled was stirring. His words felt like tiny cracks in the armor of arrogance she had worn for years. The man didn't scold her, nor did he raise his voice. Yet somehow, his presence carried a weight that Clara couldn't shake off. And this was only the beginning. The flight stretched into its third hour. The cabin lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the passengers. Clara tried to sleep, but her mind kept circling back to the old man's words. When comfort comes at the cost of others' suffering, it isn't luxury, it's theft. The phrase replayed like an echo she couldn't silence. Suddenly, turbulence shook the plane. Trays rattled, glasses spilled. Clara gripped her armrest in panic. The elderly man beside her, however, remained calm, his eyes closed as if he had lived through storms far greater than this one. The captain's voice crackled through the intercom, assuring everyone it was just a weather disturbance. Yet Clara noticed something strange. The old man was whispering softly, not in fear, but in prayer. His lips moved with words she didn't recognize, but the tone carried deep conviction. After the turbulence subsided, Clara finally broke the silence. "Why are you so calm?" she asked, still shaken. He opened his eyes slowly. "Because storms don't scare me," he said. "I've faced worse on the ground than you can ever imagine up here." Clara leaned closer, curiosity outweighing her pride. "Worse? What do you mean?" The man's gaze drifted toward the window, to the endless dark clouds outside. "I buried my son during the last drought in the Sahel. He was only 12. Died of thirst. That's why I don't fear turbulence. I know what real chaos feels like." Clara's chest tightened. For the first time, she had no clever reply, no sharp remark. The arrogance she wore like perfume began to fade, replaced by something she hadn't felt in years: shame. The old man continued, his voice steady but heavy with memory. "I saved for 10 years to afford this ticket. Not to feel rich, but to meet someone waiting for me in Paris, my daughter. She studies water engineering. She dreams of building systems that will make sure no other child dies the way her brother did. This seat, this flight, it's part of that journey." Clara froze. Every assumption she had made shattered in an instant. The old man wasn't out of place here. He was exactly where he needed to be, carrying the weight of sacrifice, love, and a dream larger than himself. For the first time in years, Clara whispered something that felt foreign on her tongue. "I'm sorry." The old man gave a gentle smile. "Don't be sorry, child. Just learn. Because arrogance dries the soul faster than the desert's sun." And for the first time in her life, Clara listened. Truly listened. The seatbelt sign turned on as the plane began its descent. The city lights below twinkled like scattered diamonds across the dark horizon. Passengers straightened their backs, fastening belts, preparing for landing. Clara sat stiff in her seat, her thoughts louder than the engine's roar. She had been humbled in a way she never imagined. The old man, quiet and unshaken, had dismantled years of prejudice without raising his voice. The announcement came. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will be landing shortly in Paris. Please remain seated until the aircraft has come to a complete stop." As the wheels touched down, a ripple of applause filled the cabin. Travelers relieved, journeys completed. But for Clara, this was more than the end of a flight. It was the beginning of a lesson she would never forget. When the aircraft doors opened, a surprise awaited. On the tarmac below stood 2 cars and a small group of officials. Clara frowned, confused. Were they waiting for someone? Passengers whispered curiously. Then it happened. As the old man in simple clothes rose from his seat and reached for his small bag, the junior flight attendant rushed to him with respect. "Sir, they're here for you." Clara froze. For him? She watched in disbelief as the officials outside snapped to attention. Soldiers saluted. A red carpet had been rolled out. And the quiet passenger from seat 2A, the man she had mocked and humiliated, was escorted off the plane like royalty. A murmur spread through the cabin. Someone whispered his name. Others gasped. Then phones lit up again as passengers recorded the unbelievable sight. He wasn't just an old man. He wasn't just another passenger. He was a statesman, a leader, a man of dignity whose silence held more weight than Clara's uniform ever could. Her face burned red. Shame pressed against her chest like a heavy stone. She remembered every word she had spoken to him, every insult, every dismissive glance. And now the world would know. At the door, just before stepping onto the red carpet, the old man turned slightly. His eyes met Clara's one last time. He didn't scold. He didn't curse. Instead, he spoke softly, but the words pierced her like thunder. "Respect," he said, "is not for titles. It is for humans." And then he walked out. Clara's knees weakened. She sat down, her heart pounding, realizing she had not only disrespected a man, she had disrespected humanity itself. For the passengers, this flight would be remembered forever. For Clara, it was the day her arrogance collapsed, and the day dignity took flight.